Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for watching this video. In this video, we are going to learn about ADP variables, that is array data provider, and how we can use that ADP variable to load data into table. And yes, we will learn about how we can load data into table based on that button clicking. Everything we are going to learn in this video. Before going to a start, I request you to, there are various viewers who is just watching videos and they have not subscribed our channel. So it's my humble request, please subscribe our YouTube channel so that it will give us pleasure and that the encouragement to create such videos again and again. Thank you so much. Let's begin. So you can see this is our Visual Builder application. Last time in the last videos we created videos where we created application. So whenever we are going to click on any row, based on that the dependent values in the below table we are able to see the data. But if you will see, each and every time whenever we are loading any table data, each and every time it's creating the independent service data provider variable, the name as SDP variable. So whenever we are loading any table in the VBCS page, it's automatically creating the SDP variables. And whenever, each and every time whenever user is going to click on every row, it's automatically invoking the REST API to get the data from business object for each and every row. So that's the functionalities here. So it's really difficult that if each and every time whenever user will click on any row, it will invoke that API, invoke the REST API. If you will see here, if I am going to click on the first row, you can see in the network I am able to see the first, invoke that API and get the details, the row details. If you will see the header, this is calling the API. If I will click on the fifth row, you will be able to see that it's invoking that API again, and that API you can see here it's calling. So each and every time whenever we are clicking on any row, it's invoking the REST API. That's the difficulty here. So for removing this dependency to call each and every time, what we will do, we will load data into this table, not using SDP variable. We will load data into this table using the array data provider, array data variable, so that the first time only it will retrieve the data from business object, store the data into ADP variable, and that ADP variable will be able to say pass the data to the table, so that the table can show the data based on that variable, so that each and every time it's not need to call that endpoint. So let's implement. For that, first we need to create one page. So for creating the page, I will create another application, right? So for creating the application, so I will go and click here in the web application. I will give the name as uh, ADP page, ADP table page. And now I will click on create. So whenever we are creating any web pages, any application, by default we are getting few design in the page. Here you will see it will load, and we don't require this design, so we have to remove all these things. So how we can remove? We can go to the code and we can directly remove this code, and once you will go to the design again, you will be able to see that everything is vanished here. So this is our previous page. I will remove this page from here. Now this is our current page. So first of all, if you will see in our design, this is the button, and here we have the header. So based on that button, whenever user will click on this button, it will load data into table. That kind of things we are going to implement, right? So first we will add the button and then we will add the heading. So here we will go to button. I will drag this button here, and after the button we have to go for heading. And here again I will add the heading here. So you can see heading and the button is added. So just we have to make it align. So I will go to the flex so that it can be in the sync. And here we have to make both in same line, that in the center only. So here you can see we have option for center. You can see now both are in center. So now we have to change the text. So how we can change the text? Just click on the heading, and even if we want, we can change the size of that text too. So right now it is h1. I will go and make it bit small and give the change the name. So instead of heading, I will give the value as employee details using ADP, array data provider, that is ADP. Now here we have to change the button name or button label as load data, load data. And now here we have to add the table so that table can display the data, right? So here we'll go, and for adding the table, we have to search the table component, TAB. You can see this is the table. I will drag this table here. So now table components added. and here we have to map the data from where this table will hold the data. And you can see whenever we are going to select the table and going to add the data, we have to select the business object, for which business object we want to get the data and show in the table. So whenever we are selecting any business object and moving next, by default it's creating the service data provider variable, that is SDP variable. But in this case, we don't want such kind of things. We want to load the data in this table using array data provider, that is ADP variable. The first of all, we have to create one variable. That variable can store the business object data. So if you will go to the business object data, that employee BO, that is employee business object, and in the data part, you can see this is our data. This all our data we have in the business object, and this data we want to show in the, we want to display in the table. So how we can do? So we are not going to create service data provider variable. So what we will do, first we will create one array variable. That array variable will having all the columns, all these column listed here, and as we know that that variable will be array, so that can store multiple records. And then that variable we will link to that this table, so that whatever value will that variable hold, it will display in the table. So that kind of things we are going to implement. So let me first create the variable. So we know that whenever we have to create any variable, first we have to define the type of that variable. So as you know that in this case, our variable type will be this much of column, all the column available in the business object, or we want to display. So we will create one type, we will create one data type. That data type contain all the columns, and based on the data type, we will create one array variable, so that that array variable can have multiple records for each and every column. So go to the main page, that is page, and here we have the type. So we'll go to the type and create one type. So we'll click on this type, and we are not going to create custom type, right? We are going to create type from the endpoint, so that we know that for getting data from business object, we have REST call, that is the endpoint call for each and every business object. So we will click on type, go to the from endpoint, and here from endpoint, if you will expand this employee BO, that is employee business object, you will be able to see that get, right? So this get will return one record for the ID which it's provided. So right now we don't need that kind of things, we just want the column names. That's why we selected get here. Go next, so that it can list all the columns, and here we have to give the type name. So we'll give the type name as get employee type, and here we will select what column we want to add in the type. So first of all, I want to add the column as ID, and again employee ID, then first name, last name, gender, email, and somewhere we have yeah, and department ID. So all these details we want to add in that type, like new type we are going to create. So now we added all these things. So new type will be created with this much of column. Go to finish. So you can see new type, that is get employee type created, and that type having all these columns. So now we have to, this time is to create the variable using this type. So go to the variable, and here click on this plus icon, and here we have to give the name of that variable. So variable name will be something employee var, and we know that this variable we are going to create as an array. So I will give as ADP. And here if you will see the type, so we have to select the type. So in the type we have to select that array data provider. So we are going to create array type variable for that one. So we'll create on click. So now this variable is going to be considered as array, but what will be the type of that variable? That type we have to define, right? So here you can see that type is that array data provider, but how many columns and that the actual type to hold the data. So type will be the new type we created here, right? So you can see the item type here. Once you will click, you will be able to see that get employee type. Just we have to select that one. So when you will select, you will be able to see all these values. And here you can see the key attributes. That key attributes will be the primary key for that one. So here I will make that one as a ID as a primary key. So now our variable is created, that ADP variable we already created, type created. Now here if you will go to the page, now in this page we have to, whenever this page will load, there can be two situations, that whenever page will load, we will load the data into that array variable, and we will link that array variable to the table, so that automatically it will display data here. And the second situation we have, once user will click on this button, then only it will load the data into this variable, this table, right? So that kind of things we have to do. So first I will go for that page load, then I will show how we can go for table on the button load, button click event, right? So we want to that whenever page will be loaded, right, a new page will be loaded, it should display data in the table using ADP variable. So we have one event for each and every page load, we have one event. So if you will click anywhere in the page, go to the event, and you can see the VB inter event we have here. You can see on VB inter event, this VB inter event is something that the page load event, right? So now here what we want, first we want to get the data from business object, and then the second step will be store the data into the ADP variable. So for getting the data from business object, we have the rest call. You can see the call rest. So I will drag this call rest here, and it will ask the endpoint, the URL which we have to call. So here you can see, once you will select this one, here we have to select the option to endpoint. So click here. What endpoint we have to select? We are going to get the data, right? So you can see once we will expand employee BO, we have option for get. So the first one, it will return back all the records present in that business object, and this second get will return only record which having the ID. So I want all the record present in this business object. So I will select first get, select. So now you can see the rest call will be done. Using this one, it will invoke the rest endpoint. So now what after rest endpoint, what we want? We want to store the result of this rest call to that variable. For adding the data to that variable, that is array data provider variable, ADP variable, we have assign activity. So I will add assign action here. This assign action will ask the variable name, in which variable we have to add the value, right? So that value we have to provide here. So now here you can see, once we will click on this assign action, where we have to select the variable, for which variable we have to store the data. You can see our variable is employee var ADP, and in that variable for data we have to assign the value. So we have to go for employee var ADP, that is variable dot data. And what kind of data we want to store in this variable? We want to store variable data to that variable coming from the rest call, this one, right? Call rest business object get all employee BO result, right? So in the value, if you will click on this expression builder, here you can see the local, this is our the rest call we added in the action chain. So once you will expand here, you will be able to see the body. Inside that body, we have the item. This is the array you can see. And this array having multiple records for all the columns, whatever columns we are getting from business object. And all this column will be mapped with the variable, whatever variable we have, right? So I will double click on the items that so that it can automatically map here in the right hand side, right? You can see. Now click on save. So now once we click on save, you can see the two action we already added. The first, it will invoke the REST API, the REST endpoint to get the data from business object. Whatever data it will retrieve, the same data will be mapped to that variable, that array variable. Now in this step, array variable having all the data present in that business object. Now we have to map this data to that table. So how we can map this data to the table? So go to the again page designer. This is our table. So for adding that array variable here, we have to go to the data, and in this data you can see here, here we have data tab. If you will go to the data tab, here we have to select that variable. So which variable it will be there? So the variable will be employee var ATP. So now you can see, once we will expand this one, here we will be able to see the data. So this is the variable, and that variable having the array element, that data that having the multiple columns, and we want display all this thing in the table. So just double click here, remove this null, double click here so that it can map this variable here. Click on save. So now you can see the table is mapped with this variable, array data variable. And but how many have to display? So if you will see that we have to add the column. So for adding the column, you can see the table column here, right? So right now we have not added any column. So just click here and you will be able to find that column name, list of the column name available in that variable. So here first we want to display the ID. You can see when we tick that ID, it's added here. Now we have to go for gender, and gender, that employee ID, first name, last name, gender, email ID and department. gender, departments, all these things, all the column we want to display in the table. So you can see this table having all the columns loaded. Now again, if you will see the data here, you can see if you want to rearrange the column, you can just go above and rearrange the column from here only. All these things we can do. So now our table is ready to display the data. You can see this is a table. So now once we will load the page, so once page will be loaded, it will invoke the action chain. That action chain will invoke the endpoint to get the data from business object. That data, it will be stored in that array variable, and that this array variable we already mapped to this table, so that this table will display the data based on that variable, right? So here you can see this table doesn't, we are not able to click on this any of the row because the table mode is not in the single selected. So I will go, and here once we will select the table, we will option for single click, right? Single selection mode. If you will go live, you will be able to see that line, right? So now here it's time to run the application. So I will run this application here. Once we will run the application, you will be able to see the data. Now you can see the data is coming from the coming in the table, but this time this data is coming from the variable, coming from the array variable, not from the SDP variable, right? So if when for testing the same, you can go to the inspect, and here you can see, if you remember, in a starting of the video only I show you that whenever we are going to click on any of the row, it's invoking the one endpoint here, but in this time it's not invoking. Why? Because this invoking the endpoint only one time when page is loaded. If we will load the page, you will be able to see that one rest endpoint call happening, and that the flow we added. So you can see here, you can see the employee BO call happening. It's returning the total 8 records response, you can see, and the same record we store in that variable, and that variable is able to see the data. So once here we are able to click, it's not going to call that endpoint again, because this table having the data from the array variable. Now our requirement is not just directly display the data. If you remember, in a starting only I discussed that we have to display the data when user will click on this load button, right? So right now the implementation we have added that whenever page will be loaded, it will invoke the API, store the data into array variable, and that array variable we already map here, so it's displaying the data. But we have to invoke the API only when user will click on this load button, right? So go to the page again. So you can see this is the load button, load data button, and we have to go for the event of this button click, right? So select the button, and for each and every object we have the event. So go to the event, and here you can see once you will click here, you will be able to see ojAction. ojAction event is something that the button click event, right? And in this button click event, we have to do the same whatever we are doing here on the page load action. So if you will go to the page load action chain event, you can see the VB interchain. So these two process are happening, and the same these two process we have to execute when user will click on that button. So what I will do, I will copy this two code. So this is the simple way I am going to explain you here how we can skip to rewriting the code same again. We can just make a copy. So how you can copy, just click on this code, and here you can see inside this run function, here we have this 2 point, that const and this two line. So the first const is for invoking the endpoint. If you will go to the design, the invoke endpoint is removed because we remove the code from here. And if I will remove this code is for calling, assigning the value to the variable. So once we will go, you can see the assign variable is gone. So now here what we have to do, we have to remove from here, and we have to add this two in the button click event. So what we will do, go to the design, you can see we don't have anything on the page load. So we will go to the page design. This is our button. But here we have the button action chain. Click here, and here we have to add this two. So for adding this two, again we will go to the code, and here you can see this is the function from where we removed, and here we will add. This function is for the button action chain, and previously where we removed that one, that was for the page load. So now if you will go to the design, you will be able to see these two action, right? So now we are done with that. So go to the page designer, and here you can see it's not showing because it will only show once we will click on this load data. So run this application. Friend, it's really taking much time to and taking effort to create these videos, do practice all these things so that in one run I can create this video and I can deliver this video to you for your practice. So please support my hard work, all these things, and you can support just by subscribing this YouTube channel, liking the video, and yes, you can share this video with your colleagues. So now you can see once page loaded, nothing is going to happen because we remove the code. So we added the code on the button click event. So once I will click on this button, again it will invoke the API and whatever data it will come, it will display here. So you will be able to see, right? So if I will load the page, again it will be happen and I can show you all these things, right? Don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. And yes, if you want to support us, you can join our YouTube membership by giving some amount. And here you can see once we will click on this load but data button, it will invoke the endpoint call. So let me go to the inspect, and here you can see if I will go to the network, here you can see we don't have anything, right? So whenever I will click here, it will invoke the endpoint. You can see the employee BO endpoint is invoking and it is getting the data, and the data we are displaying storing in variable, and that variable is linked to the table, so it's showing data here. Friend, this is the simple and the easiest way to learn about ADP variable, learn about the loading data based on any event, the button click event or anything. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe our channel. Thank you so much again.